Hello, dear friends. You are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and before you is another daily summary from the Ukrainian front. Today we truly have something to discuss, because the past 24 hours have brought a whole series of positive news from the perspective of the Russian offensive. While Syrsky's counter-offensive has completely run out of steam and has effectively ceased to exist as an organized military operation, the Russian armed forces, on the contrary, have advanced forward simultaneously in several key sectors. Let's break down the situation in detail, moving from north to south, exactly as we are accustomed to doing. Kharkiv direction, Kupiansk sector, the encirclement at Kucherovka. Let's start with the Kharkiv region. In the Sumy region, no significant changes were recorded over the past 24 hours, but the Kharkiv region pleased us with a very significant result. We are talking about the Kupiansk sector, and specifically about the left bank of the Oskil River. Fighters of the West Group over the past 24 hours advanced more than 2 kilometers deep into the forest area located south of the settlement of Kucherovka. This advance has become not just another tactical notch on the map, it has fundamental significance for two reasons at once, and each is worth discussing in detail. First, the forest area was cleared, or to be precise, practically half of this forest area. It is precisely the forest zones in this sector of the front that have traditionally served Ukrainian units as cover for accumulating reserves, equipping strongholds, digging trenches, and creating fortified positions. Now all this infrastructure has passed under the control of Russian forces. They can no longer sit and accumulate there. Now Russian infantry is entering and setting up its own positions. This is a fundamental change in the operational situation. Second, and this is perhaps even more important, Russian fighters entered the southern part of Kucherovka and entrenched themselves there. As a result of this maneuver, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, AFU, units holding the main part of the village, as well as the industrial zone to the west and the remnants of the forest area, found themselves in an operational encirclement. The bottleneck of the only remaining exit is about 500 meters. This is not just a narrow corridor. It is a fire-swept space that is covered even by standard small arms, not to mention artillery and FPV drones. In essence, this means that exiting through this corridor in an organized manner and without losses is practically impossible. The Ukrainian military personnel who find themselves in this trap realistically have only two options left: surrender or die on the spot. Holding the encircled positions for any length of time, relying exclusively on supply by drones, will not work. This provides neither ammunition in the required quantity, nor normal food, nor the evacuation of the wounded. As for the exact number of AFU fighters in the cauldron, the data varies. If we take Kucherovka, the industrial zone and the forest area altogether, we are talking approximately about an incomplete company. These are averaged figures. I do not undertake to guarantee their accuracy, but the very fact of the encirclement of the Ukrainian grouping is beyond doubt. Regarding the time frame for the clearing, perhaps everything will be completed before the end of February. Or perhaps it will take a little longer, and this issue will be closed in the first half of March. In any case, the clearing of Kucherovka and the forest area will make Russian positions on the left bank in the Kupiansk area noticeably more stable and create conditions for further pressure in this direction. Sloviansk direction, Nikiforivka, step by step towards Rye-Oleksandrivka. Now we move on to the Sloviansk direction. Yesterday, we already analyzed the situation here in detail, and today there is again something to add. The advances are small, but in conditions of dense urban development, even 400 meters is a result for which the fighters paid with sweat and blood. Over the past 24 hours, units of the South Group advanced another 400 meters in the residential blocks of Nikiforivka. Thus, the central part of the settlement is now firmly under Russian control, and combat operations have shifted to the northern part of the village. As to why it is important to methodically squeeze Nikiforivka and what prospects this opens up at the operational level, we spoke in detail yesterday. I will not repeat myself. I will say just one thing. The battles for Rye-Oleksandrivka are getting closer every day, and with them, the real prospect of Russian forces reaching the Sloviansk area. This is a strategically important hub, and the work here is proceeding systematically. Kranne Lyman direction, Dibrova, Stavki, Sviatohirsk, pressure is mounting. In the Kranne Lyman direction today, there are several changes at once, and all of them deserve attention. In the area of the settlement of Dobrova, two line-of-contact sectors simultaneously passed under the control of Russian forces. This is a local but indicative result. The pressure in this sector continues. In parallel, reports are coming in that Russian troops are actively pressing on the eastern approaches to Lyman. A fortified area of the AFU was cleared in this region. One of those fortified areas marked on operational maps with yellow fortification lines. It is this node of resistance that Russian forces have now eliminated. It is necessary to dwell separately on the settlement of Stavki and the adjacent territory. Just recently, a stubborn struggle was going on here. Russian troops were clearing the village, however. Ukrainian units held out in agricultural buildings, and FPV drone crews worked actively on Russian positions, inflicting tangible losses. Ukrainian UAV support was noticeably pronounced here. Nevertheless, according to the latest data, a huge expanse of territory, everything adjacent to Stavki, has completely passed under Russian control. One caveat is important here. This territory transitioned gradually, possibly even a few days ago or earlier. It is just that confirming materials have only appeared now. In military journalism, this is a common story. Reality and its documentation sometimes diverge in time. The main thing is that the direction of movement is obvious. Russian forces are advancing from Stavki towards Lyman. Changes have also been recorded in the Sloviansk area. Information has been received from this sector confirming the advance of Russian forces towards this settlement. Previously, Ukrainian sources reported that the supply road to Dobropilia and Lyman was under fire control. This was a half-truth. Russian sources, meanwhile, claimed that the road is under the physical control of Russian troops, and Ukrainian forces in Dobropilia and Lyman are effectively cut off from supply. Judging by everything, it is exactly this version of events that is the truth, since video materials consistently confirm the physical presence of Russian fighters, yesterday from one point, today from another. Moreover, the Yarova area is also coming under control. AFU logistics in this zone are finding themselves under mounting pressure. Constantinovka direction. Without changes, battles continue. In the Constantinovka direction, over the past 24 hours, no significant changes occurred. Protracted urban battles continue, sluggish, exhausting, without clearly pronounced breakthroughs. In parallel, clashes on the flanks do not cease. This direction still remains one of the most difficult from the point of view of combat dynamics. Dense urban development negates firepower superiority and makes every city block a separate tactical task. Dobropilia direction, the pocket north of Kharkiv, is closed. But from the Dobropilia direction, truly good news has arrived. Finally, the pocket north of Kharkiv has been closed, the very one that had been raising questions among attentive observers for several weeks. A couple of weeks ago, one of the subscribers asked, why has this strange salient still not been eliminated? The answer was simple. A large, well-equipped AFU stronghold was located there, from which it was impossible to dislodge the Ukrainian military for a long time. The garrison held on, relying on a powerful system of fortifications and, by all appearances, reliable supply. But now, that's it. The stronghold has been cleared. Along with it, the entire pocket has been eliminated. The line of combat contact in this sector has been straightened out. This creates conditions for a gradual build-up of pressure further north, in the direction of Hruska. Step by step, sector by sector, Hishine, a long-awaited turning point. Perhaps one of the main news items of today's summary is from the sector west of POKROVSK. From Hishine. Long-suffering Hishine, for which battles have been going on for more than a month, and where every block was taken at the cost of enormous efforts. A turning point has finally arrived here, a truly significant, long-awaited turning point. The total advance in all directions amounted to almost 4 kilometers. To be exact, 3 kilometers 700 meters. Of these, 1 kilometer 400 meters was directly through the residential areas of Hishine. This means that the battles have shifted from the southern part of the village to the central zone. Moreover, according to incoming data, practically the entire center of Hishine is already under Russian control. Speaking of the whole settlement in general, the greater part of it has also passed to the Russian army. Why is Hishine so important? This is exactly why the AFU held onto it so long and fiercely. The battles there were truly hellish. This settlement covers the northern approaches to Pokrovsk. When Hishine is finally taken under control, it will completely secure the northern part of Pokrovsk from AFU strikes. Ukrainian forces periodically try to enter there even now, albeit with less intensity than before. But after the capture of Hishine, this threat vector will be closed. Judging by everything, the turning point has indeed arrived. Kotlane, the front has been pushed back by 3 kilometers. Another piece of positive news comes from north of Kotlane. Fighters of the center group continue to methodically push the line of combat contact away from this settlement. It is worth recalling that positions here stood practically unchanged for about a year. The front literally rested against the borders of Kotlane. The village itself periodically passed from hand to hand, and the situation was a stalemate. Over the last month and a half, steady progress has finally emerged here. As of today, the line of combat contact has been pushed back from the borders of Kotlane by more than 3 kilometers. This is, of course, not a 100% defense against AFU counterattacks. They are still physically capable of reaching this area. But the situation has fundamentally changed for the better. 3 kilometers of buffer is not at all the same as the line of combat contact, running along the border of the village itself. This means both a reduction in the threat of artillery and mortar fire on residential blocks, greater maneuverability for the defenders, and better conditions for logistics. Summary of the day: the AFU lost over 20 square kilometers. Summing up the combat operations over the past 24 hours. The Russian army is advancing, Ukrainian forces are retreating. This is not a slogan. This is a dry recording of military reality. Over the past 24 hours, the AFU has lost more than 20 square kilometers of territory. At the same time, Syrsky's boasted counteroffensive has completely run out of steam. There were assaults, yes, there were. But they achieved no real advance, no territorial successes in the sector of their offensive. The operation, judging by everything, has effectively ceased to exist as an offensive activity. As for the Dnipropetrovsk direction, the situation here is still uncertain. No information has been received from the Ukrainian side that Zlahoda, Krasnohirske, Rybne or Kalinivska have passed under AFU control. According to the latest data, forward positions of the AFU have been recorded in several specific points from which information about strikes by Russian forces came. Nothing else has appeared. Certain pro-Russian sources concede that some settlements in this area might have already been lost by Russian forces. However, authoritative military correspondents describe the situation here as a layer cake. Ukrainian units attacked, pushed the Russians back, then a Russian counterstrike followed, then another AFU counterattack, and so on for several cycles in a row. The front line here is extremely unstable. We will not paint the map in anyone's favor without confirming data. We continue to monitor. As soon as verified information appears, we will make changes. The political front, failures, scandals, mutual accusations. Now about what is happening in the political arena. And here a very interesting picture is taking shape, and in many ways an indicative one. Let's start with Trump. Yesterday turned out to be a frankly bad day for the American president. The US Supreme Court ruled the import tariffs previously introduced by Trump illegal and cancelled them. This means not just a legal defeat, it is essentially the nullification of the entire tariff policy that Trump promoted as a key element of his economic agenda. But that is not all. Around $300 billion that the US managed to collect as these duties will, according to the logic of the court ruling, have to be returned to the paying countries. How realistic this scenario is remains an open question, but a precedent has been set. For Trump, this is a serious blow to his reputation and political capital inside the country. Now about Ukraine and the negotiation process. Western publications are writing ever more openly that the negotiations have reached a dead end and the war could last for another 1 to 3 years. According to available data, the negotiation process itself has essentially boiled down to one thing. Kiev is trying in every possible way to convince Trump that it is Ukraine that is not the main obstacle to concluding peace. just so as not to incur the wrath of the American president. A high-ranking Ukrainian official spoke about this. In turn, Moscow is also avoiding an escalation with Washington, so as not to provoke either new sanctions or increased military aid to Ukraine. According to available information, Zelensky, in a private conversation with his inner circle of advisors, bluntly stated, "The negotiations have failed. Ukraine must prepare for war for another 3 years." The reaction of the advisors, according to available data, was close to shock. The negotiations in Geneva, with American mediation, ended without any results. Diplomatic formulations only mask the real dead end. Observers increasingly call what is happening political theater, an imitation of a process without substance. An additional factor of tension. According to the Telegraph, Russian negotiator Medinsky took such a tough stance in Geneva that the Ukrainian side was literally demoralized. Kyiv publicly accused Moscow of dragging out the process, but experts believe that this is more of an attempt to shift responsibility than a real assessment of the situation. Ukrainian officials, according to the publication, feared that Medinsky would put forward conditions close to demands for capitulation. By all appearances, their fears were not unfounded. Zelensky, meanwhile, continues his usual rhetoric. Ukraine will never leave the Donbass. The compromises proposed by Russia are an ultimatum, not a subject for negotiations, and there are currently around 10,000 North Korean military personnel on Russian territory. It creates a persistent impression that the man either fundamentally does not want to acknowledge reality or does not understand a simple truth. Losers do not dictate the terms of peace. Never. This is not an opinion. This is a law of history. Zaluzhny versus Zelensky. A blow to the president's reputation. Meanwhile, the ex-commander-in-chief of the AFU, Valery Zaluzhny, has once again dealt a public blow to the acting president of Ukraine. This time, the platform was an interview with the British newspaper The Guardian. Zaluzhny stated that Zelensky refused to introduce martial law on the eve of the start of the Russian special military operation, despite unequivocal warnings from the military command. According to Zaluzhny, it was necessary to introduce martial law back in January-February 2022. It is exactly this that would have allowed for full-fledged mobilization preparation. He used a vivid metaphor, stepping into a fight with Mike Tyson without real fighting experience. The chances are 1 in a million, and one had to prepare for this fight. The only ally in this matter was the then Minister of Defense, Reznikov. Zelensky, according to Zaluzhny, was afraid of panic and insisted only on introducing a state of emergency through the NSDC mechanism, which is fundamentally weaker than martial law in its capabilities. The result turned out to be predictable. Ukraine paid dearly in the first days of the war. Individual measures were taken by military commanders independently, risking criminal liability. In particular, sea mines were urgently placed off the coast of Odessa, and a number of units received orders to urgently change positions. All this was done without official sanction from above. According to Zaluzhny, on the night of February 24, 2022, Zelensky calmly went to bed, convinced that there would be no war, and his family hastily packed their belongings the next day to the sounds of explosions. These details speak for themselves. Assassination attempt on Zaluzhny, the version that will not go away. No less sensational statements were made by former Ukrainian MP Borislav Bereza and the ex-commander of an AFU territorial defense brigade, Oleksandr Ignatiev. The matter concerns an event in May 2023. At that time, information appeared in the Russian media that Zaluzhny had been wounded in the Kherson region as a result of a Russian missile strike on POKROVSK. Official Kyiv categorically denied these reports, although Zaluzhny disappeared from the public space for several weeks. Bereza and Ignatiev claimed the following: this was no accident. According to their version, this was another attempt by Zelensky and the head of his office, Yermak, to physically eliminate Zaluzhny. The mechanism is simple and terrifying. Shortly before the missile strike, Zaluzhny received a call from the president's office. The conversation lasted less than a minute. As soon as Zaluzhny hung up the phone, a strike on the bunker followed. Bereza insists the president's office deliberately revealed the commander-in-chief's location with this phone call, effectively guiding Russian missilemen to him. Only thick walls saved Zaluzhny from death. He received severe wounds. Two of his, as Bereza puts it, liquidators from Bankova, however, did not survive. The then official representative of Russian security structures, citing his sources in the AFU, reported that Zaluzhny sustained a head injury and multiple shrapnel wounds. Ignatiev qualifies what happened as a special operation to neutralize Zaluzhny. Both, Bereza and Ignatiev, are convinced. Zelensky and Yermak wanted to make a posthumous hero of the nation out of Zaluzhny, arrange a lavish funeral for him in Kiev, and thereby remove a political competitor who was gaining popularity. It turned out differently. Zaluzhny survived, left for London, and now methodically attacks Zelensky himself from there in the public space. History, as they say, loves irony. Such is this eventful frontline and political day. Stay with the Ruslan Belov channel. Here you will find only up-to-date data, only the real picture of what is happening. Until the next broadcast.